Hi guys, in this video we're going to look at the 10 most often mistakes that we make when we turn to our dreams for interpretation or advice on our life. In the end of the video there's a bonus that can explain all of the problems in one single point, but we have to go through all of them first so that we can see what and understand better the perspective that we're going to express. Let's begin. The first mistake or misunderstanding that we do when we turn to dreams is neglecting them or forgetting them. It's practically the same thing. Now, everything that we're going to look into in this video is based on the idea that, or the thought, I'm not going to do it, or I won't do it. What do I mean? So, if we forget the dreams, we usually are prone to think that we don't actually dream during the night, or that we don't have enough time. This is when we're neglecting them. It doesn't really matter which is it. Usually neglecting them leads to forgetting them, and then it's like they never happened. And this is our first mistake. We should be able to give them a little more time. We mostly don't think that the dreams are so important, but we all know that they have a sufficient amount of information that can be very helpful to us. And again, if we look at them as something that's unimportant, we're not going to use them in a sufficient way. We're actually going to have issues and difficulties expressing and understanding them, which again leads to that perspective, to ignore and forget them, and we leave them at that. So my first advice in that regard would be to focus on them and work with them. It doesn't really matter how. We're going to look into the next steps as we go through them, how we can learn from them and use them, and naturally why we think and make those mistakes. The second mistake that we actually make towards dreams is that we don't interpret them. Now, even if we do remember them, even if we don't neglect them, we think about them, we don't actually interpret them, we just leave them at that. Which is okay in some cases, but we have to be open enough to understand the ideas that stand behind them, which usually in me developed after I started interpreting them, because I developed a great understanding of how my brain works, what my logic is, how I see things, and the idea of looking at a picture is enough for me to understand what that means to me and how I want to bring that into fruition, or not, depending on what the message is, good or bad. The third mistake that we usually make is that we don't take them seriously. One way or another, we don't actually accept or see our dreams as something important, which is why we are prone to neglecting them, we're prone to forgetting them, we're prone to laughing at them without any serious content in their direction. So it's really just us disregarding them in the fullest sense that you can imagine. Sometimes we like to think that dreams are just some lolly experience that we have, and that's kind of the fun of it, and that's all they're good for, which we can use them in that way, but there's not a lot of understanding in that regard, and we can't really use them if we look at them in that way. Now, this video, since it's going to be long, since it's going to be a lot of information given really quickly, have in mind that there's a link in the description for an article which you can read at your own pace and with more connections, so that it's easier for you to understand. I'm really having difficulty summarizing all the information, but I believe that everything that I'm giving you here is important. So, having said that, one of the most interesting perspectives that we have about dreams is that we don't actually see them as a logical thing, we see them as something bizarre. And that's funny because as it turns out, dreams are actually the most logical thing for our brain to understand, and they're so well expressed that it's actually feeding him. Our dreams are feeding our brain, and in that way they're helping it develop and continue forward and move through life. These connections are actually based on information that I've gathered and experiences that I've had. We'll go into it a little deeper in another video. It's just that we don't have the time to look into this one. So if you would like to see how the hypothesis develops, and it's probably not going to be in the next set of videos, I'm going to be honest with you, but you can still subscribe to the channel so that you can see how things can move forward. The idea here is that because we see dreams as illogical, we tend to neglect them and strive away, distance them from us, because we're kind of afraid of seeing what they mean. Since we're used to keeping to a specific logic that is required by our daily activities, we don't usually like straying from it. We would like to keep it simple so that we can keep it simple. In that sense, we don't have a lot of fuss, we don't get confused, we don't lose ourselves, we are focused on what we're doing. But that doesn't really help us, because there's no real development in the brain, because the connections that we make in our brains are actually at the same, right? There's nothing happening in them, there's no adventure, there's no provocation for development, there's no provocation as in enthusiasm. Because at one point, even if it's hard for us, hardship turns into enthusiasm if we accept it and start thinking and adapting to it. It's just so curious to explore new ideas that we lose ourselves in them, and this is what I mean by keeping it simple, because at those times we're actually prone to also forgetting who we are and finding new perspectives, whereas in some point we have learned or have been taught that we should be focused on one specific thing. But the truth is that we can be focused on one thing and do a lot of other things which are also connected, even if we don't see it. If we stay true to our direction, our path, everything is going to be connected. It doesn't really matter how we express it, it's just we have to move in that direction. And this is the principle that I would like to share with you. And here, how is it applicable with dreams? Well, think about how random they are, but they hold within themselves the best logic that we can assemble when we're relaxed. So when there's no resistance, because when we're sleeping, the activity of the brain when we're dreaming doesn't really differentiate from when we're awake. Sometimes it's higher, sometimes it's lower, but it's practically all the same. It's like we're awake. So the connections that we're making are free, and that's helping us. Let's put it that way so that we can move forward, and we're going to look it up in another video. I'm sorry. Now, maybe the biggest mistake that we're making, and the one that's most applicable to everybody, is that we're interpreting them in the way that I'm not sure how to put it. In the other videos, you can see me telling you that it doesn't really matter how we interpret them. Every single piece of interpretation or way of interpretation holds truth to what it actually is. But if we do it in a sense that we're going to close ourselves off and to remain in our comfort zone, it's not going to help us develop. It's actually going to hinder us, and at some point it might actually hurt us. And the idea here is to be always open-minded about what the meaning is, and following the messages, the steps, the markers that the dreams hold in themselves, so that we can see a more global interpretation and something that we can use, something that we can strive towards as a result, because that's what brings us pleasure, when practicing and doing. That's it. And after that, we're happy with the result based on our interpretation of the result, which means that we can interpret it in a way that makes us happy, that we can use it instead of being angry and dismissive, which in my experience, being happy and inclusive is always the best option and best choice. But you can see it for yourself when you actually do it. The sixth mistake that we do, or it's more of a belief that we develop, is that we believe that we don't have the time, or that we can't interpret the dreams. So we don't have time to interpret them because we're busy or what have you, it doesn't really matter, or that we can't, because mostly we know of people that are successful by interpreting their dreams and etc., but ours aren't that way. The idea here is that everybody can have that. It's different for everybody, and the success is just around the corner once we start doing it. In which case, I would like to mention that the problem is our mindset that I'm not going to do it. That's the reason for everything. If we don't focus and start doing the interpretations, we're not going to develop the habit or the understanding of how we are supposed to interpret them and understand them. It's logical, right? We have to do something in order to understand it. We have to learn it in order to finish it. And this is a process. It's always a process. In the beginning it might be slow, but in time, if we're practical and we're consistent with our interpretations, we're going to find faster ways, and we're going to make faster connections of what they dream. And we're going to develop the habit of asking ourselves, what does this mean? So much that we're going to actually ask it in a dream, see the interpretation, be inspired because it's always uplifting. And once we wake up, that state of mind is going to remain, and we're going to be more active and inspired during the day. And isn't that what we're always striving towards? The seventh mistake that we usually make is giving in to exterior interpretations. By giving in, I actually mean that we solely rely on that interpretation, and we don't think about it, we don't connect it with anything in our life, we don't look into it in any given perspective, we just accept it, and usually after that we don't do anything. There are a couple of things here. Usually there's no way for someone to completely interpret our dream because he doesn't have our specific logic, our specific understanding. Even if we are looking into a dream dictionary, it's still developed by somebody with a specific logic. There's no way to confirm that single interpretation of that object or symbol is going to be the correct one or the adequate one for us. It can help. We can always advise ourselves with those sources. We can advise ourselves with other people that have practiced with that. We can use every piece of information as long as we're ready to accept it and see its practical application. That's the only thing that's going to help us. If we just accept it and we do nothing afterwards, as well as, and this is something that you should know, if somebody tells you that something is coming your way, nothing is coming your way. You have to do something in order to have a result, in order to see that it's coming. And even then, since it's coming, you still have to make the step towards it, to go to it. Never is waiting a good option, because when we usually decide to wait, we neglect our activities, we start going lazy, we don't actually have a direct connection with our surrounding environment, we don't have an experience because we're just waiting. And I can't stress this enough, how important it is, because experiences are the things that we learn from the most. I will always remember the moment when my grandmother was showing one of my nephews to not touch the fireplace. Here they're enveloped in metal, and when the metal heats up, that's how we heat up our rooms. And she was showing him not to touch it because it's hot and it might hurt himself. And he didn't really, he was looking at her so excited, and he practically touched the fireplace and moved his hand away real fast, and he repeated her words. And it's just the realization that he did something my grandmother did in order to show him that it's bad, and when he did it, he understood what she meant, and he also understood what hot means and when it's dangerous, because he can feel it for himself. But that's the experience that he had, that's how he learned it, and that's how life always is. Sometimes we can conclude that something is bad, but not always, and sometimes we're even wrong. So it's always best to try out something and see what the effect of it is, with the necessary precautions if necessary. But still, we should try to see how dangerous it is. For example, falling is dangerous, but when we have a parachute, it's a hobby, it's an activity, it's thrilling. And the point of all this is that if we give in to an exterior interpretation, or we're looking for someone to interpret it for us, it usually means that we haven't really made the decision of being practical. Which means that even if somebody interprets and it's 100% true, it won't matter for us because we're not going to do anything afterwards. This is what I would like to stress out. But we can always consult with every source, everything, because if we consult, that's a little bit of more information in which helps us understand more of what our situation actually is. And in that sense, it's okay to seek external interpretations. Another mistake that we make, it's kind of the same with the third one, but we're going to look at it in a different perspective, is that we don't take them seriously. What do I mean in this instance? It's again connected with neglecting them, thinking that they're just dreams, thinking that they don't have any meaning, thinking that they just are, and moving forward. Basically, those perspectives are again based on the on the understanding that we won't do it, or the mindset that we won't do it. And there's always some back-end thought that makes us think that there's no point in doing that. But we all know that there's a significant amount of information that we can find in dreams and that we can use. So again, why diminish them and not take them seriously when we can use them and further our development in an easier way, easier path that can help us. Now, why am I always saying that it's easier and we are developing? Because that's my experience. Of course, that's my mindset for dreams, which is why I'm experiencing it that way. You can always subvert it and make it into something bad. It's your choice. Another thing that we do most often is we don't take any practical action. Even if we interpret them, we just let the interpretation fly. We just accept it. By the way, accepting it means doing something about it. So in this instance, accepting the interpretation doesn't actually mean that we're going to do something about it. So in that sense, it's pointless to even look at them because thoughts without action have no fruition. And the idea here is to understand that we have to have the understanding and the practical action of what we're supposed to do instead of just having the understanding. Having the understanding doesn't always mean that we're going to augment our actions. Sometimes we have to make more of an effort to make the change instead of just flowing by the. And by the way, that usually if we're just flowing as the current goes, that usually means that we're not going to change anything and that we're just letting everything be how it always has been. In that case, I would never advise you to do it, because if we want change, we're looking for change, we know what to do, it can be very crushing to leave ourselves on the same path. If you have to take a vacation, do something out of the ordinary in order to see that you can and that it's good and that it's okay. It really is. Our life is really about experiencing new planes, new things, being curious about life more so than surviving. We're always going to survive. That's actually a conclusion that I reached. It's always based on how we act and what we do. It's always with us. Once we take up responsibility for our actions, everything becomes easy. That's pretty much it. The funniest mistake that we make, once we see that the interpretation is true, that it has meaning, that it's the exact thing that's happening with our life, we still neglect it. We say, okay, I knew it. That's what I know. I knew it. It's okay. I was prepared for this. The idea is to rise above what we are and move forward, push forward if we have to, more than just staying there and saying, yes, I knew it. There's no actual beneficial practice except feeding our ego when we say that. Even if something bad happens, and at some point there's always something bad happening, something that we don't like, even when we see it, even when we know that we've been prepared for that, we've been told, we've been notified, so to speak, we kind of look at it and say, yeah, okay, so that happened, I knew it, and if it's bad, I just need to change the way that I look at it, and everything's going to be okay. That's true, and it's moving in the right direction. But again, if it's based on laziness and sloughing, we're not going to have any good results, and we're actually piling pressure on ourselves because the change is there and we're just looking at it and waving as it passes us by. And once it passes us by, we feel terrible because we passed it by. We don't know what that experience holds. We don't know what we could have achieved. We don't know anything practically. In which case, again, my advice is to take dreams seriously, interpret them, take the time if we have to, wake up earlier if we have to, so that we can interpret them, have the time, and be patient. Again, in the beginning it might take long, but in time we develop the habit and it becomes a lot faster in a matter of seconds. And the bonus that I'm going to give you about the mistakes that that we usually make is that we usually say to ourselves, someday we're going to look at them as well. Someday we're going to have, when we have the time, we're going to look at them as well. That mindset means absolutely nothing. And this is because the work that we leave for tomorrow remains for tomorrow. When tomorrow comes, it's today. So tomorrow is tomorrow. It's always tomorrow. And we don't actually go to the next step. The only important thing is the thing that we're doing right now. In which case, my advice to you would be, even if you remember some dream for years back, during this video or at any time, my advice is for you to take the time and interpret it, see what it means. And what I've learned is that it's always applicable to my current cases because the connection is there, and since we've made the connection, we know there's a connection with it. Dreams don't really appear out of nowhere. They're specifically meant for us. We know what they mean, we just don't interpret them or understand them logically, which is why leaving logic behind is always a good advice when we're looking at intuition, meditation, dreams, regressions, progressions, new experiences, new relationships, everything. Because this is what opens up space for new experiences and new perspectives. Now the truth is, as you might have guessed, is that all of these mistakes are the mistakes that I've been making. And the advices and the solutions that I'm giving you are the ones that work for me. For you, it might be something different. I'm giving them to you because I believe that in some way they might be applicable to you. And also, if you're watching this video, there has to be some connection. Even if it's just one point, even if it's just one mistake. Again, there's some useful information in here for you. Even if it is for you to see that I can't actually help you, or I'm not doing it the right way, this can still help you if it inspires you to work harder and find the actual way that works. This way, my mistake becomes your motivation to make it right. And I don't mean that in a way that I like lying to people, so to speak. But the idea here is that we can help each other out. Because some people are going to see sense in this video, some people aren't going to see sense. And it can be useful to both people. It's really just how we choose to do it. The idea here is to really understand that dreams can help us, we just have to use them, and it's easy, and that we all can do it, as well as that I don't want you to think that I understand something. These are a couple of connections that I made, and I'm presenting them to you in order to help you see a new perspective or a clearer perspective of the mistakes that we're making when we're interpreting dreams. But all in all, it's really your choice how you're going to use this information, as it is the same with dreams and interpretation, intuition, meditation, and so on. This is where I'll be leaving you. If you like the video, you can click the like button. You can leave your feedback below in the comments. You can look up at the article for this video to see it in its full form, and you can subscribe if you wish to see how this channel is going to develop. This is everything for now. Goodbye.